Hello, everyone. Today I am with good friends and colleagues from Monmouth University, and just here with Dr. Golan, Jaminapi, Raf Seglo, Joel Sabokta, Krista Hogan, our friend Mostafiz, who has helped us all the day long. And we are very thankful for being here tonight, no, for us.
Okay, hello everyone. The pleasure is mine. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this important panel discussion on helping the helper. And let me begin by thanking the organizers for organizing this remarkable gathering. And thank you everyone for participating in this first World Congress on clinical social work. And sometimes we feel like we are helping people, we need not get help from others like that. And so that's the reason today's session centers on a topic that is often overlooked but deeply essential, and how we as a social workers and helping professionals take care of ourselves while serving others. And I'm really honored to welcome our distinguished speakers, panelists, who bring diverse experiences and insights to this important dialogue. Please join me in warmly welcoming them as they share their perspectives. So, panelists, the floor is yours. Please continue. Thank you.
I will introduce each one, starting for Joel Sabotka. She is PhD LSW CADC, is an associate professor at Monmouth University School of Social Work. She teaches courses through the bachelor's and master's program. Dr. Sabotka has developed study abroad seminar for MCW students in Italy and Germany, and has taught at Cato University in Germany. She also serves as the chair of the School of Social Work, coordinator for the School of Social Work's Play and AIM Expressive Therapy Certificate Program, and Departmental Advising Coordinator. She is Joel Sabotka, and she will, she and the group, no, will do the team helping the helper, no? Ahora, the next one, vamos a... Sí, ahí tenía. Yami Napi, she is a social work professor and doctoral student in human rights and leadership, engaged in an teach clinical practice from an anti-oppressive framework. My current research interests include collaborative social work practice in Vietnam, as well as rights-based study abroad. She's also exploring the intersection of animal and human rights as it relates to social work ethics and levels of practice, and as an overall social justice issue. And next. Ralph Coseglio, DSW-CSW, is an associate professor of social work at Monmouth University, dually licensed in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Dr. Coseglio has maintained a private psychotherapy practice for 15 years, collaborating with adolescent and adult clients using a trauma-informed and attachment-based treatment approach that incorporates mindfulness-based intervention and cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT) strategies. Dr. Coseglio is a clinical social work supervisor to licensed social workers (LSW) pursuing clinical licensure. He is also certified in psychedelic-assisted therapies and research and MoMA-assisted psychotherapy. And the last one is Krista Hogan. is a senior lecturer and PSW program director in the School of Social Work at Monmouth University. She has been teaching at Monmouth University since 2002. She teaches in both the undergraduate and graduate programs. Krista has a variety of practice experience, including working with children with emotional and behavioral difficulties in educational setting as a clinician, as an intensive in-home community therapist, working primarily with diverse populations, and in private practice working with children, adolescents, adults, and as a clinical supervisor from practitioners. So, just Krista, hold on. No, I think it's all. So nice to meet you guys, really. Oh, Mostafiz, maybe you
No, yeah, I'd request, I don't know who will coordinate. Dr. Zuel, please continue the panel discussion, and thank you. After the discussion, we'll open the floor to our audience to join the conversation.
Wonderful. So hello and welcome. We have prepared some thoughts and some words on helping ourselves as practitioners, the thought of compassion fatigue, what to watch out for, taking care of ourselves so that that compassion fatigue that many of us feel in the clinical world, practicing in the clinical world, doesn't move into vicarious trauma, and of course does never move in, hopefully, to burnout. So I'm going to share my screen up. Let's see, let's share the screen and we can move through. We're a small group, so of course, feel free to ask questions as we move along. That's perfectly fine with us, and we can move pretty informally. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. And there we go. Okay. So I'm going to start off turning it right over to Ralph so he can talk a little bit about what the research tells us.
Thanks, Joelle. Thanks, everyone, for the warm welcome and having us. So the first thing that we really wanted to do in presenting this material is really frame it in some research and give it a foundation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. As many of us clinicians know, we routinely deal with clients who disclose traumatic material to us, whether that's happened in their childhood, whether that's something they've experienced in their adult life. It is something that we experience, many of us, on the day-to-day. When you have, as a clinical social worker, a higher level of exposure to clients, right? And there are some clinicians who specialize in dealing with trauma and clients who are have experienced trauma. It is a significant predictor of vicarious trauma, right? Or secondary trauma that the clinician will feel, right? As a result of being exposed to traumatic events again and again, hearing about them from their clients. So a bit of research about this, when we're speaking about vicarious trauma or burnout or compassion, one of the things that I found that was interesting was that in some research done by the NASW, 70% of social workers had experienced a minimum of at least one vicarious traumatic symptom. Right, so this is a really high number when we think about that, and 55% have experienced at least a minimum of one core traumatic symptom of vicarious trauma. So a high number, high percentages when we're looking at clinicians who've experienced some degree or some symptom of vicarious trauma. When we look at burnout rates in particular, lifetime burnout rates, at least according to the NASW, and that is the ethics governing body here in the United States, 75% of social workers or clinicians experience vicarious trauma, burnout. When we look at rates of compassion fatigue, right, we find that's similarly concerning and ranging between 13 to 15%, experiencing some compassion fatigue, right? And so we really need to think about our self-care practices and taking care of ourselves as clinicians when we're looking at such high rates of vicarious trauma, burnout, and compassion fatigue.
So I often think, as a clinical social worker working with, children, adolescents, adults, is there really ever a way to completely avoid at all times compassion fatigue? And I'm actually not sure. I do hope that there is a way to avoid vicarious trauma and certainly burnout. But when you look at the root of the word compassion, um, the Latin root of compassion, com meaning with, pati meaning suffer. So we're talking about suffering with our clients. And so the idea of being completely cut off and not really feeling at least something when you have clients who truly are suffering, it's certainly a challenge to strike that balance to protect ourselves. And we're going to get to that towards the end of how to take care of and prevent burnout, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue as well. If you look a little bit about, what does compassion fatigue actually look like? A normative occupational hazard of working with traumatized clients, a consequence of listening to a history, to events that our clients have experienced and the negative reactions just from bringing empathy to work with our clients, which of course we always do, and that's what we're trained to do, is to always work and intervene with empathy without psychological distance. So when we're hearing that raw emotion, those raw experiences of our client, it can often feel as though the trauma is also happening to us. It's very hard sometimes to separate that out. If we understand what's happening and we are preparing and protecting ourselves, we are more likely to practice self-care. We have that awareness. And if we are practicing self-care, it's going to make us hopefully less susceptible to compassion fatigue and worse. Uh-oh, and my slides are not moving. Okay, so what might that actually look like? We may feel as clinical social workers anger towards the causes and the origins of what our clients have experienced and what they've gone through. We may feel sad, even depressed, knowing and hearing what our clients have experienced, and a sense of powerlessness over how we can really help them. That may come home with us. So we're taking our work home. We're thinking about it after hours, after we've seen the client. It could be days after we've seen the client. We may experience bystander guilt. And those symptoms in us can look like exhaustion, feeling emotionally drained, feeling overwhelmed, lack of energy. And whoops, and I hit it too fast. And so these are things that we want to look out for. It's part of our own self-care and insight into what we're experiencing as we continue our work as clinical social workers. I'm going to pass it to Krista to talk a little bit about what that looks like continuously.
Yeah. Thank you. So I really liked the way Ralph and Joelle kind of explained. It's almost like in my mind, this continuum where compassion fatigue, I think, is much more common, like the statistics show. And I think we bounce back a lot quicker from compassion fatigue. I just think of it as, I'm so deeply empathizing with my client or my family that I'm exhausted from it. I'm tired of being so compassionate and empathetic, like it just wears me down, right? So we're going to kind of walk into vicarious trauma a little bit, which is a little bit more involved and can really impact us more. So this becomes more of a change within us as the therapist, where this empathetic engagement really can kind of have us result in our own negative impact, our own negative experiences. And so to constantly be exposed to these negative experiences, it can transform us a little bit. And it affects the way we engage. It can change the therapist's self-image. It can disrupt us, our identity, our memory, our belief system. And similar to compassion fatigue, it's also like an occupational hazard. This is something that really does happen to us. And, even though we try to take care of ourselves, this can really develop into burnout, which we'll also talk about. So what might it look like? What might be the symptoms that I'm experiencing vicarious trauma? The reactions might be similar to the people we're working with who may have experienced the trauma. So we're kind of hearing about their experiences, their traumatic experience over and over again. And now we may be reacting as though that trauma happened to us in some way. We might start to have difficulty managing our emotions. We might feel irritable and tired, difficulty making decisions. We might experience some physical symptoms. We might lose hope. Sometimes that hope is almost with the client. Like we lose sight of what we're there to do, with our clients, which is really instill that hope and make sure that they have all of the skills that they need and that we're identifying strengths and all of that. But sometimes, we can lose hope because we're so wrapped up in it. And we might begin to really be reactive to their experience. We might feel anxious and we might have actual, our nervous system can be affected by the trauma that they're sharing, which Ralph and Jamie will get more into later about how to navigate that. And so when we think about burnout, right? So this is kind of like we haven't really dealt with the compassion fatigue. We haven't really worked on the vicarious trauma, and the result could be burnout. And this is just a feeling, we could feel a general sense of malaise where we have that discomfort, that feeling of just like, we're not okay. We could feel psychologically stressed, depleted, exhausted, helpless, hopeless. I think about, missing work. People are now calling out, coming in late, checking their clock frequently, or their watch, just not wanting to be in the space because it just feels toxic for them. And this can be really, now we have this negative attitude towards our clients and our work and our own life. We're bringing things home. We're thinking about things that have to do with work. When we talk about compassion, fatigue, and how do we expose ourselves to people's trauma all the time, right? We do it every single day, and we have to go into those spaces really well and really taking care of ourselves so that we can have some separation. And like Joelle said, I don't know that we can ever really separate, but when we're so overworked and overwhelmed and we don't have time for self-care and we're not doing the work, this can result in all of this and really burning out.
Okay. So Krista and Joelle spoke, I think, really well about the symptoms, the behaviors, the experiences of social workers when experiencing burnout or compassion fatigue, or even vicarious trauma, right? But I want to shift a little bit now because, right, a lot of those are in the professional domain, right? Doing the professional work. But we also have our own lives as individuals outside of the work that we do, right? And so here we have 6 different life domains. And this might not be all inclusive here, but what we have here is areas like physical, right? Sleep, diet, exercise, areas in our professional life, right? Which we've been talking a lot about already. Things that we do personally. What are our hobbies, right? Activities that we enjoy, things that we do for personal growth. What's going on with our finances and our investments and our financial situation. So, cash and assets and investments, things like that. What are our social relationships look like, right? With friends, with coworkers, with partners, with family? And then finally, do we have some sort of spiritual practice, right? And or religion? Are we connected to our religion in some way? And so when we look at these areas of our life, they can be, on one hand, real sources of energy and vitality for us. But when we look at them, on the other hand, they can also be sources of stress and depletion for us too. So it's really important that we take a look at these different areas of our life and consider, all right, one way I think of something like physical, right? What is my sleep hygiene looking like? What has my sleep been like, right? What has my eating been like? I know when I'm particularly more stressed, I don't eat as well, right? I also know that I'm not sleeping as well either, right? I'm making less time for social relationships in my life, to see friends and doing things like that, right? So we need to be able to look at this both ways. Like, so for instance, these past 2 weeks, I spent some time with friends that I hadn't seen in a while and went and seen some music, right? So it's something I enjoy doing. It's something that I hadn't had the opportunity to do for a long time, and something that I felt like before getting there, I was dragging myself to. I was so tired. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to go. But afterwards, I felt really great about it. So it's really good to look at these both ways when we're moving now into this area of talking about self-care. All right, so thinking about self-care, one of the, I think, most important things to think about is if we are burnt out, right? If we are compassion fatigued, right? We are not going to be the most present and able to provide a holding space and being most attuned to our clients, right? To be good caregivers, right? To be good clinicians, we need to be able to practice self-care ourselves, because we know some of the occupational hazards and some of the symptoms that go along with that, right? So, whoop, that's okay. So when we have good self-care practices, right, when we're taking care of ourselves, both during our professional day and then in our personal lives, right, we can mitigate or limit the impacts of vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and burnout. Okay. So how do we build some awareness around this, right? Oftentimes, it comes with, oh, I'm feeling this way. I'm sad. I'm feeling angry. I'm irritable. I'm tired, right? So that's the feeling state of it. Or we have thoughts. This client is really frustrating me right now, and you have a thought about that, right? They say the same thing again and again every week, right? Maybe you're frustrated about that. But it's really important for us to get in tune with what is going on in our bodies. What physical sensations are happening in our bodies, right? There's a lot of, historically talk of like the mind-body connection, right? What is the connection between what is going on in our minds and what is going on in our bodies? And so what is our body trying to tell us, right? What sensations are present, right? So examples of this might include tension in my shoulders. I am somebody, and this looks different for everybody, right? I am someone who I know holds a lot of tension in my shoulders. It took me quite some time to realize that in my life, right? But with some self-care strategies that will come up later, I've gotten better at realizing when I'm cinching my shoulders like this and holding my shoulders tight. It could be jaw tightness, right? It could be digestive discomfort, right? Like, what is going on for you in your body, and what is it trying to tell you? Okay, next slide. So when we're thinking about self-care strategies, one of the things that we want to do is make them achievable, right? They should be realistic, something that we can actually do. So, for instance, one of the things that I feel like it really is important for me is physical activity, right? And when you're looking at these different domains in your life, and taking that inventory, finding out what is important to you, right? What do you feel like is doable for you? What might be doable for Joelle or Krista might not be doable for me, right? And vice versa. So really looking at, things that are going to fill up your cup, right? Because a lot of the times that energy is being siphoned out of the cup, right? Because of the compassion and the space that we're holding for our clients. So what is something that's attainable for me? Exercising 3 days a week for about a half hour to 45 minutes. I know 6 days is not going to happen for me. I'd love for 6 days of exercise to happen for me. It's not possible. I know what my schedule looks like. It is not possible. So thinking about, is this doable, right? Is this achievable for me? Connecting to your reactions, right? So again, if we thinking back to that domain wheel, those 6 domains, right? If you're noticing you're isolating a bit more, that might mean in that social area, in that life domain, it's probably going to be important for you to engage more socially, right? To try to nudge yourself, if you can, to make those social connections, whether it be a phone call, whether it be spending time with a loved one, right? Pay attention to where those things are happening in your life. If you realize, I'm not doing this hobby that I used to do all the time, right? Okay, well, that personal area is something to pay attention to. Recognizing some of the pitfalls with your chosen strategies, right? So again, it gets back to what is achievable and what is manageable for you, right? When we think of goals and having certain goals, right? We can get to the point sometimes where we make them so lofty that we can't get there. And then when we don't reach them, right, we become really hard on ourselves, right? Or we just give up and throw our hands up and say, oh, well, that didn't work out. I guess I shouldn't do it anymore, right? So recognizing where those pitfalls are. And things that are comforting and restorative and healing for you, right? If you think it's going to be something that's just going to add more stress to your life or be something, just an additional thing on your plate to do, it's likely not going to be helpful for you, right? So how is this going, asking the question, how is this going to be comforting to me? How is this going to be restorative to me? How is this going to help fill my tank or fill my cup up? Next one. Okay, so looking at a couple of these areas, maybe it's simply attending to the feelings that you're going through, right? On a day-to-day basis. So one of the things that I try to do day to day, and some days I'm better at it than others, is what sometimes is referred to as like a mindful moment or taking a deep breath to pause and slow down, right? Just sort of taking a breath through my nose and then exhaling to just slow things down. It takes literally 3 seconds for me to do that, right? But it's one of the things that I know if I am tense or the chatter or the talking in my brain is really loud, right? Those thoughts in my brain or coming at a fast rate and maybe not so positive, that's something for me to do, right? Looking at examples of what's everyday self-care for you. This could be making sure you're hydrated, right? An area that personally I'm not so good at. Sometimes I look at Krista during the day and she's drinking a ton of water and I'm like, wow, I really wish I could do a better job at that, right? But what during your day can you do? I try to make it a point to at least get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. I know for me that's important. How do you take deliberate breaks from work, right? How do you step away? That's really important. So I usually have a cutoff time where I'm like, okay, at a certain time of night, I'm not going to work anymore. It's usually before this, but today is an exception. So here we are, right? It's different things for different people, and that gets back to like looking at those domains of your life and deciding what's possible for you and what you can do and what's going to be restorative again for you, right? I mentioned exercise for me as one of those. It's not one for everybody. Yeah, like running a few miles might be the thing for me, but for somebody else, it's walking for 15 minutes, right? You need to make it something that feels doable, manageable, and not another added stress. Next one. Okay. All right. So thinking about stress in general, right? One of the things that happens with stress is, and this applies to the areas that we've been talking about already, like symptoms of compassion fatigue, symptoms of burnout, symptoms of vicarious trauma, right? Our nervous system gets activated in all of those situations. Whenever we are under any amount of stress, right? And it doesn't need to be related to work, right? The first slide of this presentation, I was feeling stressed, right? I could feel it in my body. I was having these thoughts in my mind about it, right? And so I know what's happening is what's called my sympathetic nervous system is kicking in, right? And my brain is sending a message to the rest of my body that there's some sort of threat, right? Some sort of threat is present. And the threat was, oh no, you're really going to mess this thing up, or you're really going to jumble your words, right? Like there are different levels of threat, right? But stress is usually an indicator that there's some level of threat. And so when that happens, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in, right? Our brain is sending a message down through our spinal cord, our vagus nerve becomes activated, and all these things begin to happen, right? So maybe our breathing becomes more shallow. Maybe we start to sweat a little bit. Our heart rate increases. All the physiological things in response to stress begin to occur, sometimes in ways that you're not even aware of. Like, for instance, when we're highly stressed, right, or in a state of fear, our digestive system shuts down at that point, right? It's a survival response. It's conserving energy for this threat that it feels like it needs to fight against or run away from, right? So these are our responses to danger. And over time, when our sympathetic nervous system begins to get activated again and again and again, it can sometimes get stuck for longer periods of time in the on position, right? And so what we want to be able to do is find ways to kick in or activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which calms us down and slows us down, right? And brings us back to our baseline. Okay, so we're looking at here a depiction or a diagram of hyperarousal, hypoarousal in the window of tolerance, right? And this is pulled from polyvagal theory that Professor Nappy will talk about a little bit more, right? But when we are within our window of tolerance, meaning our emotional window of tolerance, what happens is we are better able to connect to others, have time and space for ourselves, right? Experience feelings of love and joy and kindness and gentleness, right? It means that our emotions at that point are much more manageable. We have the coping skills and the strategies to manage our emotions, and therefore we're able to communicate and connect. So if we're thinking about this from a therapeutic standpoint or a clinical standpoint, when we're with our clients, right, we want to, is all the time really, to be within our window of tolerance, right? So we can maintain that holding space for them and that container for them, right? And be receptive to whatever it is that they're bringing into the room, right? However, if we are burnt out or highly stressed, right? highly stressed even from things that are going on in our lives, right? And we talk about that too. We have our whole personal lives to deal with outside of work, right? So let's say, for instance, someone is experiencing a chronic illness, okay? And they're still practicing clinical social work with their clients. So they're going in every single day, knowing that they're living with this illness, which is very stressful for them, right? Yet they're not talking about that in the room with their clients, but they're living it in their personal lives. It's with them all the time, right? It can be, in some cases, not so difficult to move into states of hyperarousal, right? When our coping strategies and capacities are overwhelmed, right? And we move into states of fight or flight, right? Maybe we're more irritable, or maybe we get a little bit testy with our clients, or argumentative with our clients, right? Or edgy with our clients, right? This happens in our lives too, right? We don't make good decisions when we're in states of hyperarousal, right? Because it shuts down our prefrontal cortex of our brain and our executive functioning skills. So our thinking capacities, they kind of go out the window, right? And we're acting much more from an emotional state than we are from a logical or rational state, because the prefrontal cortex of our brain that really helps govern all that stuff is offline for us. Same if we are dysregulated and we move into a freeze state, right? We may, for periods of time, disassociate or check out from our clients, go somewhere else, right? We might seem like we are in a trance, very preoccupied with whatever it is that's sort of going on in our mind, or whatever it is that the stressor is that's really impacting our lives, right? And so it is so important that we engage in these self-care strategies so that we're not moving into these states of hyper or hypoarousal, right? Or if we find ourselves moving into them, we have strategies and skills to help us begin to regulate again and move us back into our window of tolerance. Jamie, do you want to hop in here? So this is a diagram really looking at the polyvagal nerve going from the brain down the spinal cord. It tracks into the heart actually and into the digestive system as well.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, really, you did a overall explanation. What I would add to it is just back in that green zone, when we're talking about the parasympathetic nervous system, there's two sides. And in the one side, which is the dorsal vagal, in the parasympathetic, where all resilience is cultivated, that is really where healing takes place. We can only heal in the parasympathetic nervous system, and our clients as well. There's another side, which is I'm sorry, ventral vagal, I meant, is where we're experiencing healing. Dorsal is rest and digest, but sometimes that's also where hypoarousal is. So we might notice that in ourselves if we're really shut down, that we really can't activate. And some really nice ways to do that is engage socially or play, and I'm thinking today, when we were doing a retreat with our students today, we played a game where we really got lost in the game. And if you think about that, that's a really easy way to understand, like when you're in that place where you're feeling love, joy, and peace, and you're in that ventral vagal area, is when you lose yourself in something like play. So we were playing a game and everybody kind of like might have been a little anxious beforehand, but once they were in the game, they forgot about everything and they were one with the game, and very mindful, in a really organic kind of way. And it resets your biology. It resets the vagus nerve. And there's also a lot of things that have to do with vagal toning that I'm going to talk about. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So some things that are really helpful with kind of that reset is things like somatic experiencing exercises. And I have a graphic that I want to share in a little bit, but in doing anything that has bilateral impact. And so one example of that is a butterfly hug. And it's very easy. If you see my hands, you just find your collarbones and you drop down right below the collarbones and you just tap, and depends. Some people do it quicker but some people might do it. I like it more like a metronome. But really what that does is it brings a better connection between the right and left hemisphere through the corpus callosum, and it settles everything it back into a baseline area. There's some other really quick ones, but other forms of vagal toning, yoga certainly puts you into that parasympathetic nervous system. Anybody who's ever done Shavasana knows that. And a lot of trauma is held in the hips. So when you do yoga and do hip openers, automatically you might move into a place where you shed some tears, things like that. But then all of a sudden you kind of feel like you're in the place where you're calming down, and yawning might be happening. That's a clue that you're in the parasympathetic nervous system. And then everything's kind of going back to baseline. Diaphragmatic breathing, humming, even singing daily can help with this. Speaking. Cold water, and what I tend to do is put cold water on my wrist or the back of my neck. I tell my clients the same thing. It automatically tones that vagus nerve in the nervous response, where you're either in the sympathetic or you're hypo-aroused. Any form of meditation, guided or guided imagery also, because it clears neural pathways. And low frequency sounds and music, like the Beatles, that's one example. Laughing, I definitely, because it's all out breath. And so when we laugh, we're doing all exhalations, and that lowers the heart rate, because a lot of times if we're suffering with compassion fatigue, and then we move into that place where we kind of get jacked up into the sympathetic nervous system, our resting heart rate rests a little bit higher. And that leads to like being really sensitive to the next prompting event, whatever it is, if we get frustrated with a client or a loved one or something like that. And that also, another thing is in terms of what our gut microbiome is doing, because we know in terms of the mind-body connection that if we have a lot of stomach acids and things like that, we're going to tend to feel more anxiety, or vice versa. Even if you get a bad case of stomach, food poisoning, your stomach creates all that. You might feel panic later in that week, things like that. So eating fermented foods, just stuff that we can do that's pretty accessible. Next slide. I'm paying attention to time too. So some daily practices that I definitely do are alternate nostril breathing. You can find that definitely online under pranayama breathing. I would love to take us through. But what I will talk about is portable breaths. And all that means is we're breathing, right? And we're bringing that breath with us everywhere. So sometimes it's just taking a deep breath in through the nose. And so let's say if we're doing 5-second breaths, we would breathe in 5 and then out 7 seconds. So let's just try that real quick. 5 seconds in and then out for about 7 seconds. So what it does is it just calibrates that, because your heart rate's going to go up when you take the breath in, and then down as long as it's a longer breath out. So that's quick. So any surge that you feel in your body throughout the day, or heaviness, or what Ralph was talking about, he feels certain things in his shoulders. I get it in my jaw. I take a breath. That's a cue for me to breathe. And if I'm taking that breath, I'm toning my nervous system. Compassion focused meditation, I always start with someone really easy, like my dog. It's really good to, have him in there. And then I think about somebody I'm neutral to, like maybe a newscaster on TV that is just benign. And then I'll think about something that's hard, that's difficult. Maybe a person that I feel a little upsetment about or worry. And then I will extend that compassion to myself. Because what we were talking about before in terms of the existence of compassion fatigue always going to kind of be there, what happens is we make a decision whether or not we're going to deal with that discomfort, or we're going to move into like a domain of suffering. And sometimes that's what the breath or the compassion focused meditation can help with. It can make us just stay in that zone of, okay, I'm feeling some discomfort and I'm tending to it, versus I'm checking out. I'm not thinking about it. It's building, building, building. I'm not breathing into it. or I'm not sending love and kindness out or to myself. And then what happens is we move into the domain of suffering, which becomes like vicarious trauma, or burnout, or even sometimes if we're feeling a lot of, like, I tend to check in with moral injury too, because there's a lot of systems that we have to work with that sometimes make our work feel complicit with the things that we're even just trying to help our clients with. If there's a problem with accessibility or systemic or structural violence, that can wear on us too. So I'm doing a check-in on that too. Self-soothing and grounding techniques. I know we're right at the wire, so if you want to just flip through, I can do it real quick, or we can open. So quick way is just soothing on all senses, in grounding exercises, thinking about things you can see, something you can taste, something you can touch, something you can hear, something you can smell. That automatically brings your prefrontal cortex back into play, because it's reminding you that you're right here in this moment, instead of something in the future that you can't control, or something that happened in the past. You can keep going. And posture, real quick, we just rock right to left, find our center. Sometimes it's just how we're sitting, where we're feeling a lot of things coming up. And I think I'm probably being flagged, maybe. Let me know if you're flagging me. You can move to the next slide. This is just a reminder that our breath is our anchor. And to me, that's the anchor between, like, whatever's happening, which I would call like a prompting event, something that's making me feel a certain kind of way. And then if I put the breath as an anchor in between what's happening and how I react to it, I'm probably going to respond in a more effective way. And I'm probably going to be more present. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was thinking about sort of breathing practices for folks too, and people's preferences with them, right? There are a number of like breathing exercises or activities that people can do, some of which appeal to people, certain people, and some of which don't, right? So there's something like, for instance, like box breathing, right? Which for me is very difficult. I don't like to do it, right? But there's other techniques that really appeal to me, right? So one of those would be 4-7-8, right, is something that appeals to me if I'm doing a breathing exercise, when I'm inhaling through my nose for 4 seconds, holding it for 7, and then exhaling for 8, right? One of the most important things is with any of them that your exhale needs to be longer. You'll find with all of them, almost all of them, I should say, that your exhale should be longer than your inhale. Like when you look at the different ones, a lot of times they're either at equal length or the exhale is longer, but it's finding something that's going to work for you too, because sometimes it's not breathing for folks. Sometimes it's like grounding themselves in their body, right? That feels more relaxing for them. So I just wanted to say there's sort of various ways to think about which breathing exercises might appeal to you.
So this is just a focal point. Basically, what I do for myself on a good day. So this is perfect self-care. I'm not, I'm waking up on time. I have this picture in my bedroom, and I will put my feet on the floor. And for me, doing either alternate nostril breathing or just doing diaphragmatic breaths in the morning. And that's my focal point, because it was a temple I visited when I was working in Vietnam a while back. And it just resonates with me. It just kind of puts me in that place where I have that drop down into the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's very grounding. What I would suggest to anybody else is find your own focal point. And that's how you start your day, because if you tone your nervous system early in the morning, you're less likely to be reactive in a negative way to the impingements that happen to us in the course of a day. You might be able to manage it a little bit better if you just start your day that way. Okay, next slide. And this is just, getting back to what Ralph's saying. Yeah, some people don't like to breathe. Some people don't like to sit and meditate. This is a labyrinth by my house. I like to walk it. I certainly have left lots of things on that bench. The whole idea is to walk the labyrinth and leave the problem on the bench, that you're working with. So it's a really nice meditation. And this is some flowers in Vietnam, another focal point. because our minds don't always know the difference. So we're really susceptible to negative things. We know that. That's how we survived back when we were in the forests and the caves. We're very susceptible to positive imagery. So my mind, I'm going to trick it to think I'm in this space where I was, this very beautiful garden that I was, where they had lotus flowers. Just mindful eating. That's a really accessible practice. A lot of us are on our computers and eating, and it's just a good practice just to eat your food and realize you're eating, beginning, middle to end. And then this is somatic experiencing. This is our safety aid. It's a English acronym. So it's slow down, connect to the body, orient, pendulate, or engage. And pendulate, I just want to teach that one very quickly. You would think of a place you hold tension. So for me, I said it was my jaw, and then a place you feel very grounded or no tension. And that's always my feet. So I would pendulate from my jaw, tension, to no tension in my feet. So we could practice it. You go back and forth. So I would go, back from my jaw to my feet. You just kind of practice with that. Were we sharing these slides with anybody who wants them? I mean, this is you can look it up online. It's Peter Levine's somatic experiencing scope. Okay. Next. And then some pre-sleep routines, because sleep is super important to self-care, obviously, and just general wellness. I use guided imagery. I use Yoga Nidra, which is just a talk down. If you're not familiar with it, just kind of talks you down to sleep. Body scans, binaural beats I'll listen to for sleep. Autogenic training, you can certainly find a really good script for that online, but that clears your nervous system as well. And following just a general sleep protocol. People think it's common sense, but a lot of times I find myself doing things that are actually bad for my sleep if I'm not paying attention to it. And then maybe some progressive muscle relaxation. And that's just really, you do go through that script from head to toe, tensing the muscle groups and releasing them. But as you're breathing out, imagining all that tension flowing out of your body. And I think that's the last slide that I was going to talk about. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Trying to stop the share. And it did stop, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So thank everyone for listening. I don't think that there's time for questions, or if anyone even has one, but we appreciate you listening.
Surely, I think, we can open the floor to our audience to join the conversation. That would be great. We have some more time. No worries about time.
But at least we could have some minutes, no? Mohammad?
I'm actually quiet, because you want to give opportunity to other participants, then I will say a few words. Anyone else have any question, comments, observation?
See, maybe Enrique, would you like to do some questions? Jonathan or Mohammad?
Okay, look like I don't hear any question, but first of all, I would like to say my heartfelt congratulations to my esteemed colleague, eminent, the faculty member of clinical social work with wonderful credential, academic background, and also licensure. As you have heard during the opening session, I talked about, what we need to have in order to become a clinical social worker in the United States. You need to have your MSW minimum, which is the terminal degree in the country. And all of my colleagues, as you know, that already, have that kind of credential. And also LCSW, which is not a very easy credential to get, and all of them have, LCSW. And also another thing is length of experiences, as you have heard from, my colleagues. And in fact, I think I personally, listening to my colleagues, I was very proud of my colleagues, the way they presented. I think it's very thoughtful, very insightful, and also made it very analytical. I think that's what, I was like listening, and I was taking so much pride in my colleagues, presentations particularly. And also I think it was again Joel who made it like competi. I always like the cultural side that you bring, which is, with the Latin background, as you said, the Spanish thing, competi, to suffer with. This summer, I went to attend and present for the European Conference of Social Work in Salzburg, Austria. I think I already spoke to my colleague, particularly, I think, Joel, I said that self-care is becoming very, very important. I think one person who is Secretary General of the European actually Association of the Schools of Social Work, she's from, I think, Bratislava, Slovakia, doing a lot of work nationally and internationally, Zuzana Zuska. So I was listening to my colleague and I listened to her. I said, oh my God, just a wonderful thing, self-care. We all the time overload and all those things, we get burned out. And what I like about my colleagues, but particularly like, self-care strategies, they not only talk about the theoretical thing, I think they also talked about feasible, practical. That's really draw my, the attention that these are the ones that practical that, one can think about. So I have a request to my colleagues. Please, please, please develop this as a paper and need to publish it. I will try, to also give you the hints, as your colleague, as your facilitator, coordinator. And in fact, we work very closely, and particularly mentioning that Joel is what we call a companion in crime or something, companion in administration. She and I all the time, for the administration, two of us, we try to actually find ways how we can actually enhance scholarship in the school. So I think this is something that I want to request. Please don't just stop it there. Presentation is very important, but I think we need to publish this. I will take one more moment. There are few people from Bangladesh reach out to me, particularly for this session. But the problem is that when we start, it was 6 o'clock in the morning, but still, I want to introduce here Mohammad Shahjahan, who is a lecturer in my alma mater and Mostafiz alma mater, University of Dhaka, a brilliant, smart, young scholar and teacher who also worked for the United Nations for a few years before he joined the academia. And he was a topper from all the 4 years of BSW to MSW. And I'm very happy to see Shahjahan, you. I know it's so early for you. So I wanted to also introduce you to my colleagues.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for a nice presentation. Actually, I'm really happy to see all of my senior faculty members by born in Bangladesh, Dr. Mohammad sir. We are so very proudful of ISWR alumni in our country. Also, Mohammad Mostafiz Khan, also the alumni member of our ISWR. So we are very happy to see that. And this session actually more fruitful for us. Also, this clinical social work is in our new concept in our countries. So I think that this sessions is or this congress helpful us to make me more confident to build a professional social worker in our countries. So I think these sessions make me more encourageous to give some knowledge and acquire experiences from your presentations. Thank you so much for everyone, and nice to meet you for again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to share anything, any questions, comments, reflections, or additional information you want?
Once again, Karitu, kudos, Karitu. Thank you so much for doing that. I think what I've been hearing from other people also that we need to continue branding and make it more, the visible in the whole world, our clinical social work. That's what we stand for in the social work academia. Not to say that like policy is not important. Policy is important. Policy matters also in clinical social work.
Yeah. I am thankful with everyone because you give your time for being here. And we are recording because most of our friends are in the morning, but like to see the record, no, because they they are not in this moment, but we are recording so they could see later, no? In other countries they could see later. So and it will enrich their knowledge, no, for everyone. And we will pass through our channel. No, don't worry for that.
Again,
But
thank you to our panelists. And before saying something about the presentation, I'd like to share my gratitude to Professor Ghulam Madbar. I'm really grateful to him, and I just want to follow him. He is a very well-known person in my country in the field of social work. He is known to everyone. Social Work Alumni Association, faculty members, university, and not only in my country, but what I observed for the last few years, he is known to, I should say, across the globe in the field of social work. And I just want to follow him. And he is really, I should say, he is my role model. And thank you, sir, for joining us. And it is my honor to be here with you. And about the panelists, this was really an amazing presentation you did, and I'm really impressed, and I learned so many new things, I should say, and you did shed light on some very important topic and some under-discussed topic, and you shared experiences of trauma and compassion fatigue, burnout, occupational hazards, social workers, individual life domains, 6 domains. I was really wondering that what I'm doing, and that was really wonderful. And also you talked about stress, how we can reduce it, some strategies, and you reminded us that self-care and professional care are inseparable from our work. At the same time, you talked about self-care strategies. That was really wonderful, and I'm really impressed. And I believe this discussion has been a timely and inspiring reminder that caring for ourselves strengthens our ability to care for others. And again, thank you for participating in this first World Congress of Social Work, World Congress of Clinical Social Work. And we are inviting you to our next session. Thank you.
And a special thanks to Dr. Goldan, that he helped us from the very beginning. Without him, we wouldn't have had all that help with our programming today. And thank you all for this entire presentation. Lovely. Really, congratulations, because your work is very, very grateful for everyone, I think. Well, we will have, it's the first time here in CAPA, no? But we will have more other activities, and so we could have many other plans in the future. Good luck with everything, guys. And one thing I'd like to ask is in my case, my little kid, yeah, he and it is a subject that many moms were asking during these days in the Congress, that how the technology programs like Roblox or like other ¿cómo se llama? Brain Bros, something like that. Are very, ¿cómo se dice? So are cute in some way, but in deep, very deep, no, is dangerous for the kids, no? Entonces, how we could control this, how we could say, o sea, put the rules, no, to the kids, o sea, because we don't want, no, that they stay just in the computer for many hours, and no sé, they could find out other things, no? Entonces, other parents don't watch their kids, no? But the parents who watch, no, what could they do in order to control, moderate, or regulate those games, no, with the kids.
Hello, Mohammad.
I think, I mean, I as someone who works a lot with children and with parenting in my practice, I think this comes up very often, and we can talk for days about this topic. You know, parenting, whether it's how active parenting is, how much structure and how much expectation and what you are doing with children these days to keep them occupied in ways that are healthy, getting them outside, having them interact socially with each other. Sometimes you'll see a bunch of children that are supposed to be interacting socially, and each of them is on a phone just next to each other. And it's so terrible to see that they're missing out on that emotional and social growth. And I feel for today's parents because it is extremely challenging to manage that expectation when you have a child who wants to be on a computer all day long, and to put in those limitations can be extremely challenging.
If I could just add, yes, I agree that it is such a concern. I think that, like Joelle said, this is like a whole presentation, but I think that the limitations and boundaries are really important. But I also think that it's important that we connect with our children and that we recognize that there are some benefits. There are some social connections happening that could be safe and appropriate if monitored. There are some fine motor and gross motor skills that are developed, and different, problem-solving skills that are being developed through game playing. So I really am a believer in the limitations and boundaries around it. Just think that limitations, boundaries, conversations, but also trying to connect with your kid and why they love these games. Why do they love Roblox? What is he getting out of it? It could be there's strengths there. So
I have a accomplishment about this context. In the Bangladesh context, I think that joint family model is a big platform to be parenting in our country. How to child are growing in our countries with their grandparents, also their cousin relatives. Also, is a big model. I think that's a big platform for parenting of children in our country. So I think that this joint family model is growing across the world to help the children for being rearing the parents among the world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I couldn't really hear what Mohammad just said. Maybe turn up your volume.
Yes, I said that the joint family model is a big hub for caring the children or parenting among the children, how to rearing within their parents, within their grandparents, also their cousins, relatives, helps to them how to growing without any digital device or any digital electronic device. So I think that this model is helpful for parenting, for growing children in our country.
Got that now.
Yeah, I think, Krista, we have actually participant here from not only from the schools and also from the organizations, the working, so policy level, non-governmental organization, governmental organization. So they are representative from even grassroots and community affiliations also. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. We are done with this session, and we'll start our next session within 5 minutes. And again, thank you for participating in this first World Congress of.
Is the next session in the same call?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.